Hello all, welcome to another episode of Consarc.ai Podcast. This time around, we've tried to do something a little different. We've tried to have three different perspectives in the same podcast episode. So we have three eminent personalities coming in this episode, each of them from their own diverse domains, looking at, dealing with customers, dealing with businesses, coming with a rich source of experience and day-to-day related, challenges that they might have. So the idea of this podcast is to have multiple diverse views on initiatives like digital transformation, finance transformation, AI, and what should today's aspiring young professional look at per se in the way that landscape is changing constantly. So hope that you guys get good takeaways that you can probably imbibe in your day-to-day life with respect to your corporate roles. So excited to present this episode from Chennai this time around. So it's a little more closer to my heart because I'm in my home ground in today's episode. So yeah, let's move on to the episode. Hi, thank you all for making it on a Sunday morning where a cyclone has turned into a deep depression. And I hope our topic and our conversation lightens up the mood and you're not as depressed as the weather probably is right now. So thanks for making it on a Sunday. I really appreciate taking time off from your family. I know as finance professionals, spending time with family is always the challenge that we try to do a tightrope walk for. So thanks a lot for that. We can start with a quick round of introduction if you can tell a bit about yourself, but just to give you a sense, two things I just wanted to kind of bring out in your narrative or your personal story introduction. One is a bit about from where it started to where you are now, and any in that journey, if there's any aha moments or existential challenges which you had to tide over, any one or two top such challenges or moments that you came kind of had that as part of your career progression to where you guys are today. So we can kind of bring that as a narrative, especially for young aspiring finance professionals who probably are looking for some inspiration from experienced people like us. So ideas to kind of see if we can inspire them as well. So if you can just introduce yourself with that one or two aha moments in your career that each of you have seen, it'll be great. So should we be the gentleman and ask the lady first?
Okay. So hi, this is Tejal Gaur. I'm a qualified chartered accountant and I've been working with Cognizant for a little over 20 years now. I joined as a trainee finance in the organization as a fresher out of the institute, and today I head the global revenue controllership portfolio at Cognizant. I would say my journey has, I think, nothing short of, excitement and wonderful experiences. And I can kind of quote, every year was a roller coaster at every stage of my career. But something that really helped me transition from a team member or a team player to a team leader was adoption of the 606, ASC 606 that was back in 2018. That was one of the project which was the most interesting project, which we had to kind of deliver it with a time constrained environment, right? We were supposed to go live on 1/1/2018. There was uncertainty in terms of how organizations across the globe are adapting to it, what policies are going to change, system changes, policy changes. Nothing in the business should break as part of this. It was a mandate, so we did not have a room to kind of extend the adoption timelines. So multitasking, managing different teams, managing different stakeholders, internal, external, working with our auditors to make sure that, we are being compliant in terms of relooking at our processes. I think that was one of the most interesting projects. And I think that helped us to just take it over from there as transformation being one of the key thing into our day-to-day operations. So yeah, I would say that was my one of the
Nice.
aha movement for sure.
Nice. So
We really worked round the clock for months, but at the end, I think the results were really. We went live, no system challenges. We were able to report our numbers on time. We had no delays in our filing. So a lot of stuffs that really kind of brought that momentum up, and then it just continues from there. I think as we can no more just be a traditional bookkeeping accountants and shift towards a transformation journey. I think kicked off really with a rapid pace from there for me.
Awesome. So before someone else starts, I just had a question. So I mean, right now at this juncture, I'm hearing it more like a hindsight. Right? In hindsight, it looks like we have the benefit of hindsight. But when you were actually in that challenge, I'm sure the grind was heavy. So at that point in time, did you look at it as an opportunity for you to kind of see how you can start elevating per se, or how was it for you at that point in
It
time?
was definitely an opportunity, and the trust the leadership had, in us that we can deliver it. I think that was the key factor, right? I think it building that trust, and then from there on being the go-to person for our leadership team, I think has been, the shift in the trajectory for me.
Nice, great. So Suresh, you want to go for?
Sure. So, first of all, thank you for inviting. Okay, it's a pleasure to be amongst all of you. I come from a place called Madurai, so I was also happy in a way. I'm a qualified chartered accountant. I did my MBA from ISB. But my first aha moment, let me start with that, is the first client what I had to work on doing articleship in Chennai was for a South India based, Madurai based jewelry company.
Okay.
To put a business plan in an Excel sheet and then work along with the team in bringing alive the Excel sheet into reality was something that was very new. I was a trainee at that point of time to learn from many people at that point of time, operationally how they expand, operationally how they scale. That was very interesting. So just going back, once I finished my chartered accountancy, my first job was in State Bank of India, then was in Bank of America. Then I went to a family office where we were investing in listed and unlisted companies. So looking at the same balance sheet, P&L from a lender perspective and from an equity perspective was a little unique and different for me. It was interesting at that point of time. Right now, I work as a CFO for an electronics manufacturing services company, which is based out of Chennai. We've listed in PSE and NSE. In terms of the aha moment that you started asking first is, I think at every point of time there was something which was pushing us towards what we can do next. At the current moment, what I think is pushing us is how do you scale and how do we in a company bring all of the teams together without isolating this is finance team, that is operations, this is BD, this is program management. So breaking the walls amongst all of it, knitting them together, making it as a blockchain. Because when we want to scale at a certain rate over 5-7 years, then all of them pushing it together and pulling it together makes it very easier. That is something that is interesting and challenging and making me wake up in the morning and go to office.
Got it. So then, usually, when I've never interacted with people, probably that's also one of the questions that are going on right now is the rate of change, or change usually makes either some set of people uncomfortable, but for some set of people, it's like an opportunity, right? Based on hearing your narrative, it sounds like you've looked at it as an opportunity in every stage, right? But how is that? How did you land that mindset? If I were to ask that question, was it something because you were from Madurai, you always felt that you wanted to, you want to burst out there, look at things, learn, become better. How did you land that mindset to look at each challenge as an opportunity?
I don't think I had this mindset right from the start and all. But I'm able to appreciate a little bit more the last 4-5 years, I would say.
Okay.
Interacting with a lot of people, interacting with a lot of leaders, and the way how they think, the experience that they share, probably that has a good influence on how we can think it a little better. And more importantly, I would say passing on this thought process, because this thought process keeps changing and adapting everyone, but passing on this to the other team members, where let's not isolate ourselves as we are an AP team, AR team, finance team. So without isolating or putting barriers around it. So first, we have to shake the hands with every other team.
True.
And then, so that is actually right now, that is a challenge. And then looking for ways how to make them also think it as an opportunity than as a challenge. Because once they start enjoying that, then it won't be a challenge. I think if you enjoy it, becomes an opportunity. Okay. If you don't enjoy it, it continues to be a challenge.
Nice. That's a good one, actually. Great. Thanks a lot. Rajan, you want to?
Hey Kaushik, so thanks for having me on the show. And when someone asks me to identify myself, I actually identify, myself as a father first, a runner second, and a finance professional after that. Of course, in the sequence of things happen, I think the finance professional happened first, but I relate more to the first two because I think running as well as being a father for my daughter has actually helped me become a better professional. I think those two have a very strong correlation with the work that I do. I'll talk a little more about that as we sort of get into more details. But then started my journey, I would say. So born and raised in Delhi, I've been in Chennai for the last 14 years. A lot of people ask me, hey, by the way, you're born, raised in Delhi. How do you find the transition to Chennai? Chennai is home now for me, and for a variety of reasons. My closest friends live here today. But then my journey started with a firm called A. Ferguson, which is no longer there. It's merged with Deloitte. But then very early on, I mean, I remember this conversation with, I think this was the farewell party that we were having, right? And then my partner at that point in time, he asked me, hey, by the way, what do you want to do, right? And I told him, I don't know. I mean, I was just I think a 22-year-old at that point in time. And I told him, I think audit is my true calling, right? I mean, at that point in time, I think using these, I mean, calling was like a very fancy word, right? And I said, I'm going to do audit for the rest of my life. Little did I realize that I actually did it only for a year and a half more after that. And I hated it so much, right? And then I very quickly realized that M&A was something that I really enjoyed. I actually made a transition from audit to M&A. I would say the next 7 to 8 years, I did a lot of work on the transaction services side, work with Deloitte. And during that journey, got an opportunity to work in the US as well as work in Bangalore. Both those stints taught me a lot of things. I got to work on fairly large private equity transactions in the US. Understands how a private equity thinks about a transaction is very, very different from how traditional strategic buyers would think, right? And then when I came back to India, funnily enough, when I went to the US, the timing was the worst time possible. I went there between 2008 and 9 during the GFC, right? In fact, a week after I landed in the US, Lehman Brothers crashed, right? Here I was, 26-year-old, going to the US with what you call as the American dream, right? Of probably building a career there and a life there. A week after I landed there, this happened, and very, very quickly I could see things around me, changing very dramatically. There were colleagues of mine who were sort of losing their positions. They were sort of let go of. There was a period in between where I remember, if there was a security guard on the floor, that means someone was being let go of that day, right? Was going to fall. So having witnessed some of that very, very, from close quarters very early on in my career, I think the one thing that it reinforced was nothing is permanent, right? I mean, you can plan as much as you want to, but the one thing that you have to be ready for is change. So I think very early on that, it gave me that sort of orientation. When I came back to India, of course, I chose to work in Bangalore because tech was the vertical that I really enjoyed working a lot in, tech and tech services. And Bangalore happened to be the hub of all things tech, right? And got to work on very, very interesting transactions. I remember Flipkart was the first sort of unicorn which got a $1 billion valuation, right? And this was when a private equity called Naspers was putting money into them. I was actually at the Flipkart office when this happened, when this diligence was happening. And then I remember they used to track these matrices on their board, right at the. So I think they hit like a $1 million shipments a day sort of a metric, right? And it was like a huge celebration that happened in the office. So very, very different sort of culture and mindset that I got to witness from close quarters. That again, prepared me for what's to come, right? I mean, because traditionally accountants come from a certain sort of old school sort of a mindset, right? But this was the new world that was evolving, right? A world that was being created by young people, right? Young entrepreneurs. And therefore, very quickly, the one thing I realized was you need to be young. I mean, no matter at what stage, your mindset has to be that of a young and an agile person. So that was another big learning. More recently, and I'll talk a little bit about the big aha moment that you spoke about. For me, of course, when LatentView happened and I got this opportunity, I actually did not know. I mean, when I was being interviewed for the role, I was not told that they had plans to go public.
Okay.
Right? It was a very closely guarded secret. Actually, the first day I landed up in the office, I was called to the founder's room and they said, hey, by the way, just last week, we've appointed bankers to take the company public. Taking action. And this is what you have to handle now. And this was in early July. And they said, we want to go public before Diwali. And Diwali was in November, right? So we just had like a 6-month window to get things done. I went into office with a certain plan that day, right? Of how I'd want to sort of speak to my teammates, things like that. All of that went out of the window. And I had to quickly come up with, the next 2 to 3 weeks were sort of, went in strategizing, how am I going to execute this, right? But the big aha moment happened when finally when we went for listing, right, and the issue opened, we actually went head to head with Paytm in the same week. Okay. Just a week before, when we were doing the price discovery or the book building, as you call it, right? Some of the bankers came back and said, hey, by the way, it's going to be like a rough ride for you guys. You're going to head to head with Paytm. Paytm is going to suck all the liquidity out of the market, and therefore there's a high likelihood that your issue may not see subscriptions to the extent that you guys are anticipating, right? We said, fine, that's fine. I mean, we're not going to change anything. We're not going to drop the pricing. We're not going to drop the valuation. We will keep things consistent with what we've been thinking all along. And within the first half an hour of the issue opening, we were oversubscribed already, right? So it was, of course, we ended up being the most oversubscribed IPO ever in the Indian stock market history, 328 times oversubscribed. While that was the aha moment, there was a big sort of negative that happened as a consequence of that, and I'll talk a little bit later on about how some of those things can be managed, right? So while we were negotiating the contract for the IPO, there is a certain fees that you pay to the merchant bankers based on the number of applications that you actually receive, right? And it's a 30 rupee application that needs to be paid to brokers and sub brokers, right? Little did we ever imagine that we will be oversubscribed 328 times, right? The cost. So the number of applications that we had received just went through the roof, and we had not modeled for this at all, right? So just that cost, for instance, would have meant that we would have wiped off almost 20% of the overall money that we would have raised as part of the IPO, right? So we had to go back to the drawing board and renegotiate this. Even on a negotiated contract, we had to sit and renegotiate this with the bankers. We said, nothing doing. I mean, there's no way we're going to pay this, right? So while there was a big aha moment where everyone was enjoying around us, we could obviously, between me and the founder, we had to get into this really ugly negotiation with the bankers to sort of bring this down. And so while there was an aha moment, there was also a moment that got us grounded immediately, right? So with the highs, you always need to be, to your point, I think this whole AI, hype cycle that's going on, I think you also need to have a certain, I would say, skeptical mindset about it to keep things grounded, right? And I think that's where someone like us should sort of step in, right? While it's great to have AI as a big enabler, I think as accountants we also have or as CFOs we have a role to be a gatekeeper and ensure that you don't take undue risk as an organization. So I think that's my
interesting. But one interesting mindset I noted when you started off is career-wise, there's a certain progression that you've had, but your priority is now negatively correlated to what has happened sequentially. Because you're looking at father, health, and then profession. But I'm sure when you were the 22-year-old and your partner asked you, I think the profession would have come all-consuming, right?
Absolutely.
So when was it a gradual, incremental, or was it like in certain milestones you went through that change in mindset in terms of how you're looking to prioritize? I'm asking that question because you're going to probably dwell on that topic a little later. Yeah. I thought I'll break the ice with that.
So the first, I would say 10 years of my life, obviously, I think health was the last priority, right? Spending late nights at office, eating pizza and having, Red Bull, for instance, I remember in the US there was this mad transaction that we were working on, and we pulled 2 all-nighters at office because there was this big private equity that we were doing work for, and they said they wanted an initial report in 4 days. The data room opened and they wanted an initial report in 4 days, right? So we had to pull off 2 all-nighters where we just ran on Red Bulls, and I don't think I'll ever do that again, right? But at that point in time, it seemed like a cool thing
to do, right?
Yeah. It's something that it was almost like a bragging right that you had, that I'm doing this. I don't see that as a brag. In fact, I tell my even people on my team, right? Don't take pride in the fact that you're working on a weekend. Don't take pride in the fact that you're working on a festival day, right? That's not a bragging right. If you prioritize your work well and you plan things well, you don't need to do it. And I think this is something that I've learned over a period of time. But I think the initial years, all of us want to prove ourselves, right? And that takes priority, but comes with experience. I think over time you learn this.
To put in some checks and balances in place.
And sometimes that just becomes the way you operate when you are in an organization for a very long time. I think people just have that expectation that you're going to be available. That's definitely very difficult to change.
Understood. Great. Thanks for that. Thanks for those personal insights also in terms of your journey, in terms of where you are. So obviously in this conversation, you're going to go through a lot. I think one thing we can agree in today's context is the rate of change. I think it's unprecedented. When internet broke as a technological disruption, which disrupted all our lives. The rate of change was still incremental. We had time to adapt and adopt. I think today we are every 2 months, 3 months, the changes are crazy. Last week, some announcements have happened. The week before, some announcements have become weekly, literally, in fact, in terms, especially the way AI models are evolving. One of the things that's really unsettling for a lot of us is the rate of change, right? And so we'll go through that as in different facets throughout this conversation. But maybe I'll start with Rajan in terms of, from an AI perspective, setting the context. Given that you've been very proximal to data analytics related, business per se, right? In Latent, how have you seen AI tangibly impact that from a business perspective? Number one. And then skeptically speaking, how has that percolated through to the finance? Or is it still percolating? Or is it still on the edge in terms of productivity? So what has been your experience with respect to your tryst with AI so far?
Yeah. I think, I don't think any, if I was paid money or a dollar for every time someone asked me a question around AI, right? Especially with, I'd be like the super, the most richest person in Chennai, because every analyst, every fund manager asks me about how's AI impacting our business, because we are in the business of data analytics. A lot of what we do from an end offering standpoint has always been not so much legacy. It's always been more cutting edge and at I would say the forefront of what's the latest. So from a business standpoint, and I'll talk a little bit about how the way our clients are obviously consuming our services and what is it that they're looking for, right? For sure, I think the last, I would say, two plus years, ever since I think ChatGPT came out 2 years back, November of 2023.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think ever since then, I think it's just been relentless, right? This whole race to see how can you be actually better than other people in the market, and how are you adopting to change a lot faster. So for sure, I think there are a lot of, I would say, internal mandates in some sense, right, that the organization's given to drive productivity, efficiency, right? And I think initially we started that with, say, some of the more delivery functions, right, where we mandated them to adopt AI to deliver work in a more efficient way. I think we made a lot of progress in that. In terms of how clients are thinking, right, I think the one thing that we have seen is, while there was this big perception that AI will actually eat away a lot of the work that we do, right? Because clients, see, traditionally, the way Indian companies have sold services, especially, has always been very headcount driven, FTE driven, right? And that's the way we need to know how to price. Even transaction based pricing or outcome based pricing is a very, very small component of what we do. No matter, even though we would want to do it, I think there is a lot of other issues around attribution, things like that. How do you actually attribute what the outcome was driven out of, right? So therefore, I think most of us adopt a FT or an effort-based sort of pricing model. So there, I think there has been a shift. I think we can clearly see that clients want more done with lesser people or lesser effort. At the same time, I think in the past, I think the one thing that I have seen play out in our business is, typically business owners, and we work a lot with business, we don't work so much with the CIOs or CTOs, much like how Consarc sells into the CFO org. We sell into the chief marketing officer org, we sell into the supply chain office, we sell into the finance org. We do very little work with the CIO or CTO org, right? And typically these people have limited budgets to work with, right? Every year they probably have $1 million, $2 million to spend, and they would always prioritize in terms of, if they are 10 initiatives, they would prioritize, say, the top 3 or 4. Now they're able to get more done with the same budget, because actually it's still costing them the same, right? So while what we've seen is the clients are not reducing their overall spends, but they want to get more work done, and therefore we have to adapt and deliver more work more efficiently. So that's, I would say, from how we are approaching the market and how we deliver work. In terms of how it's percolated to the finance team, I think the one thing for sure that, and this one finance transformation that we have actually, the finance team has very, very closely partnered with an internal organization. So there's a project management tool that we've built out. It's called PRM. It's essentially a tool which helps us forecast as well as monitor project level profitability, as well as drive resource management, as well as, I would say, have a very close look on the pipeline. So for between my CEO and me, that's the tool that's the single source of truth for the organization, right? And this is something that we have very, very closely co-developed along with the team, to the extent that all reviews within the organization today are only driven. So if it's, no one can open an Excel spreadsheet and show them, this is what it is, right? All reviews happen through the PRM. And the PRM is a dynamic sort of a tool where, based on what we see play out, forecasts are adjusted accordingly, right? And I'll talk a little bit more about how it's impacting some of the initiatives that we are doing at finance as well. So this has been one big change that we've seen, right? Where it's no longer all forecasts reviews are happen through the PRM. So that's one big change that I've seen at least.
Got it. And would it be fair to say your adjacency with the way your business has been forced to adopt has also kind of forced you to look at that as a mindset, as a finance, or that is kind of
100%.
yeah.
100%. So one example that I can think of is the just the way even though I spoke about outcome based or transaction based pricing, 95% of my contracts are still FT or effort based, right? So one thing that we would do in the past, for instance, is the price book or the sort of the input, the cost parameters for the price book would be, I would say, a lot more static in the sense that they would be updated once
Got it.
in 6 months, right? Now, based on, because again, AI and some of these skills are such hard skills, you're actually having to hire at a very, very rapid pace. I mean, and a lot of times you'll have to pay top dollar to acquire the talent, right? So therefore, your cost base is constantly changing, right? So we've made this tool, the PRM tool is a dynamic tool which takes your latest costs, right, at all points in time. And therefore, whenever a business head is taking pricing decisions, you have the most recent cost base, as opposed to in the past where the price book would be updated once a quarter or once in 6 months. So it's no longer static. It has to be constantly changing. So that's one thing.
That's the business need, effectively.
Absolutely.
And which will come to organically to Tejal next. But there's one narrative that I also kept hearing when I spoke to a couple of consulting partners, especially in Big Four. So my question to him was, how are Indian companies looking at digital transformation as an initiative, not necessarily finance? And because we are starting to see more allocations being done on the budgets towards these kind of initiatives across functions, not just finance, right? And the quantum is also increasing. 5 years back, probably that number would have been there as a placeholder with a nominal amount. But today the number is actually being a reasonable percentage of overall plan in itself. So I was asking what's a trend of Indian companies doing it. And it's exactly what he said, what Rajan, he said CEOs are asking for weekly EBITDAs and finance team has no option but to become real time. Now, if that's what the CFO is given as a mandate, he has no choice but to adopt transformation initiatives because his people can't deliver him there, right? So it kind of becomes a force that's coming in from business, which forces us to react, and rather than having a luxury of choice. Is how the trend that even was articulated and very well put out from your side, Rajan. So Tejal, with respect to you, very similar to probably Rajan's experience, your adjacency to being in the ITS space as a sector obviously puts you under the pressure a little more to be adopters, right? Early adopters, because you're seeing that happen to your customers in business. So how has it been for you in terms of the mandate that's come, from stakeholders to adopt transformative technologies, not necessarily AI, right? And sometimes we just talk a lot loosely on AI. Not everything is actually AI. It could be as a simple transformation which could galvanize as well. So I'll probably just pull it back and say, how has it been from a transformation perspective for you, and what's the kind of pressure that you've been facing, especially in the last 2 years, to transform your function?
So, yeah, I mean, definitely, yes, the pressure of adapting to a digital world is more in any IT or tech sector, right? Because that's core to your service offering, right? Like what we are engaged into is deeply tied to our service offering, and IT sectors are kind of quoted as the tech enablers for our customers, right? So it's no more trying to just do operational optimization for your own self. It's just beyond that, right? Because the customers look up to you in terms of, how do they really transform their systems and processes. So over the years, what I've seen as a shift is we are no more a traditional service providers of doing development of certain systems and maintaining the systems or doing the transaction processing for their work, but clients really look up to us as an IT partner in terms of how they reimagine their processes, how do they really redefine their flow of activities, and eventually I think that comes with a sense of also the responsibility on us, right? And it just goes because of the fact that sometimes we also have the data and the digital management of the data, right? So as we kind of talk about transformation, I think IT companies tend to really have data in a more structured manner than non-IT service providers, and it just translates into the fact that the expectations from the customer in terms of demonstrate in terms of how you are basically managing your systems and processes, and lead by example, right? Like, we are just not trying to use AI or any sort of transformation as an internal tool as part of the delivery. Sometimes it's also sold as a service to our customers, right? So it's a dual imperative for us to ensure that we are able to also showcase and demonstrate to our customers as things keep changing so rapidly. I think demonstrating the use cases has become the expectations from our customers, and it just puts the pressure back on the finance organizations, because from a CFO's lens, I think they want to make sure that you're being compliant, the governance is in place. We are really not trying to kind of, we are the gatekeepers, or the guardrails are in place. Like, to your point, Rajan, right? Like, the pricing gets challenging in the current environment, because we've always traditionally operated in an FTE based world. But today, when we talk about agents being developed and agents performing the work, it's a digital labor we talk about. We do not have enough information in terms of how do you price for a digital labor. What are the rules to account for the cost? Do you capitalize the cost as you're building the agent? Do you really kind of have to charge this to XYZ customers? How do you even price it to your customers, right? Like, you can have tools in place, but then do you have accounting rules in terms of how do you kind of, define this? And the pressure continues, because as part of the IT sector, the CFOs also have increased pressure to really kind of demonstrate this, because that's kind of looked as one of the differentiators into the sectors, right? That, okay, here is the shift, and here is the productivity that we are able to pass on. And customers definitely look up on in terms of the savings. I think that has become the new norm. Every contract we kind of get into the negotiations, savings is the first thing they look up on to. And is it savings in terms of really optimizing the processes through automations and RPAs, which probably is the old norm, or really trying to replace the job itself through an agent? So it's an interesting phase where all of us are trying to just make the right balance between, how do we really make this shift and gain the customer confidence that we are here to kind of transform their processes, but at the same time make sure that our processes are robust enough not to kind of, break the guardrail. Yeah.
So, I mean, before I loop in Suresh, one of the things on pricing that you both were talking about. So, my colleague Karthik had attended a conference in the Valley, in the Bay Area last month, and it was with ServiceNow, HubSpot, these new age companies who were also no more new age. They are figuring out what is their new age. So, one of the things that was being spoken about was outcome based pricing, and I'll give you an example with that. So, one of the ITSM companies was saying, for every ticket that is getting resolved with an AI agent, and if the user confirms that it's resolved, you're going to price the user for every confirmation the user is going to confirm it's resolved, right? So which means there's been no human involvement and an outcome has been achieved. The customer has confirmed, pricing will start, billing will start happening, right? So those are models which are, I think, is more market discovery kind of models. You can't have a costing mechanism for that effectively, right? So it's going to be a market kind of outcome driven model. So I think those are things that are being spoken about, especially in the new world where agents are doing the lifting and grunt kind of a work from a data perspective. So Suresh, you are uniquely positioned right into EMS, right? And that's probably one of the most bullish sectors right now, with hardware playing catch up with software. I think left, right, center, you're seeing investments being done across the world in manufacturing, in capabilities. Large Indian corporates like Tata's, Reliance's have started setting up plants and facilities from a manufacturing perspective, especially in the EMS space, right? With them foraying into it and them vertically integrating backwards. So how has it been for you in terms of how has this change impacted your business per se? Number one, broadly speaking, from a business standpoint. And how do you see this percolating down for finance in terms of how challenges, where do you see, finance needs to kind of evolve, and where do you see scope where finance can evolve quickly with tools that are coming in from the technology space? So how do you see these two facets?
I'll set the context a little bit. Like you rightly said, so we are a manufacturing company, electronics manufacturing company. We have offices in US as well as in India, and that's the reason why I'm specifying on the US plan there. So let's say the last 5-6 quarters we have been growing at 40 to 50%, and the outlook for the next 5 years, 7 years is also looking okay, which means the scale and growth, the industry is offering that scale and growth.
Yes.
Okay. How do we capitalize the opportunity which is lying in front of us? This opportunity was there in China 20-30 years ago, but right now what is present in India, what all we have to do to gear up towards that, to gear up to capitalize that. With that being the context. And the second part of the context is being listed. We have to constantly manage what investments do we have to make, which is going to help us in the long-term profitability, long-term balance sheet strength, as well as what you have to avoid or what you have to do today to maintain the short-term. And constantly every decision will have to go towards long-term, short-term, and then you have to juggle front and back towards that. The second part. With this context, more than from a finance angle, come to finance angle, but I think the way how we operate is more from a business angle. Okay, whether it is sales, program management, operations, finance, we operate as a single unit, and then how do we do that together? And then it has to percolate, of course, to individual departments. So first, when the business is scaling and growing, okay, we will have to bring in efficiency internally and externally. Okay, internally amongst various teams, what do we do? Okay, externally to our customers, what do we do? Okay, so coming down to the first part on internally, let's say for example, being a manufacturing company, the number of SKUs that we produce are 2,000 and plus, and each SKU will have the number of parts in each SKU will be 1,000, sometimes 10,000. So you have to procure today a same part we'll be procuring from China, tomorrow it may be from Taiwan, and it can be from US. So where you procure, it's semiconductor components are truly global. You can procure from anywhere you want to. Some of it even from India, right? Okay. So with these many number of SKUs and those many number of suppliers, what do we bring internally to make it better? Because when we grow at 40 or 50%, we can't grow our teams at 50% size.
Yeah.
Okay. And this growth is happening in quarter to quarter, okay, year on year, and not over 4 years, 5 years, which means the pace at which we bring this change. More like you rightly said earlier, it is no more special project. It is day to day what you do, how you can do it better. It's a very right thing what you said earlier. So what are we doing internally? One, let's say for example, if you are going to import so many components, every bill of entry will be between 40 pages to 60 pages. So today what did we do 5 years before? When we were growing at a very slow pace, 10-15% slow pace, at that point of time we had all the time in world to take every page, every single data point, put it in the ERP, and then if there is some errors in it, which there will be, okay, you again had all the time to go and correct back the errors, and then we can move on with that. But right now, when the transactions are higher and then you're growing quarter on quarter, with that being said, now what we're doing is, how do you use OCR, for example, in that? Okay, bring all of that into a system. Okay, and you reduce the error rate by, let's say, 99.9% types. Okay, and then you leave the leeway. What this is internally, the team also doesn't get frustrated, and externally, we are able to answer to the customers very quickly. And today we are, as a country, we are very small in terms of manufacturing. So what do we bring? What does India bring? Is it, we are a very small company, $150 million types companies, right? Okay, the total market size is $1 billion today. Whereas if you go to San Jose, you will have 5 or 7 companies who are $5 billion, $10 billion. So what we bring is the agility. Okay, so the agility with which we respond back to the customers. So this is one use case what we are bringing. Let me take the second use case. Payments. So for us, most of it is import payment. When it is going to be import payment today, most of it is every transaction you'll have to close it in the bill of entry will have to be closed, and you have to follow a series of steps. But right now we are implementing host to host on the import side, where from the bank statement, pushing of the entries, starting from pushing of the transaction, checking up all the documents, and then once the amount is transferred, confirmation getting reposted back into SAP, all of it we are trying to through a host-to-host route, implementing it along with this. That's the second part. The third part is we were 3 years, 4 years back, and now the number of people in our company have tripled. So when you have that sort of a growth, we are not used to that sort of a number in the past. Okay, so how quickly internally we will be able to onboard an employee. Okay, instead of manually keying in every single data point. Okay, how can we, instead of going and typing let's say a PAN number, Okay, can it be automated and then just fed in? I just scan everything else and then can it come over there? That's the third point. The fourth point is because we have a plant in the US, okay, and US facility with every country is going country for country now. Everyone wants to make it in their own region, right? Okay, and our US plant is growing. Unlike in India, in US the people cost is the major cost. Okay, and so whatever we are able to bring over there in terms of I don't know the right word, whether it is AI or productivity or automation or efficiency, whichever word that is, whichever that can bring in, whichever can shorten the turnaround time, whichever can bring in reduce the error rate. So there we are bringing in terms of any changes that is brought in the product, because we are a manufacturing company. We manufacture a product. When you manufacture a product, sometimes the customer asks for some changes to be implemented in. Instead of component A, why don't you use component B? Instead of component C, why don't you use component D? Okay, so the speed at which you get back to the customer, if I implement this particular changes, because in a PCBA circuit board, right, different schema will respond differently. So what can be the optimal one, and if you're able to turn around quickly to that, that's another aspect. Okay, in terms of coming down to finance purely from that perspective, we are bringing in a consolidation tool which sits on top of SAP, because again it is not just to it's an automation perspective, because for me, by the time we complete the previous quarter results or the previous monthly results, whether I'm going to give the monthly results on the 10th or the 15th or the 2nd, it makes a huge impact from an operations perspective. Because in a quarter, if my first month is a certain way, and the quicker they're able to turn around in terms of margins, and that, then the operations team will be able to make amends to the particular quarter. How much should we catch up? Where should we catch up? On the revenue or on the cost? And then the decisions also can be taken very quickly. So this automation on the consolidation tool side, or in comparison of your budget versus actuals, typically we are, at least I'm used to until a year ago or even now, mostly on Excel side, right? Okay, whatever ERP we have, ultimately the comfort is coming in pulling the data into Excel and then doing it in Excel. So how much of that, instead of doing it in Excel, I'm sure Excel will be there, but then how much of it which is repetitive can be done outside Excel, which can come and sit in our mailbox on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, depending upon it. So that is something that we are working on.
Got it. Understood. So, I mean, it's an interesting point that you bring out, especially on capturing the source of truth in terms of data, right? And that logically, thanks for that. That logically moves me into the next aspect that I wanted to discuss and get your thoughts on, all of your thoughts on, is surrounding data, right? I think you're seeing a lot of different data strategies being adopted globally speaking, right? But not just for finance, also for business. Like we see large enterprises having data warehouse, data lake solutions because they have a fragmented application system from different businesses. So just integrating into so many fragmented applications is a no-brainer. It's virtually a not undoable task. So a lot of data lakes, warehousing solutions, and being invested by select enterprise groups, I would say. Not everyone's going down the strategy, and I'm sure you're aware of that. But there are others who are also kind of figuring out at a transaction level how to manage and get data, and then as an infrastructure, if I were to look at data as an asset, how would I serve this asset to my stakeholders is probably the way questions are being asked. And then you brought it at a transaction level. It was a logical kind of a question, which I'll probably then start off with Tejal saying, from a data perspective, what is your perspective in terms of saying how much are customers and companies looking to invest in that data as an infrastructure, data as an asset? Is that still underinvested in today's market as we speak? Are we still trying to only work with fringe case scenarios and not really bringing in that consolidated kind of an effort? So what is your outlook?
Yeah, that's one of the key concern I think that I see as a finance professional. We do not really are in a mindset of thinking more holistically. There is definitely a lack of a unified data layer that exists today. And that happens because, sometimes everyone is looking for quick wins. You want to kind of build dashboards and project it to somebody that, okay, this is my AI output or this is my transformation that I've delivered. So that's something that we've seen where nobody kind of talks to each other. To his point, I think where AR talks to AP team, to the pricing team, and to the business guys. Today, I've seen within the organizations across where teams do not talk. So everybody starts building their own systems and apps and siloed and fragmented approach. And sometimes if you fix your input, the output fixes for itself, right? Like sometimes it's just that lack of a unified data just gives inconsistent outputs. That's how I've seen it. And I'll just probably touch upon one of the use cases we had, right? Like we had really reimagined one of our processes in terms of the contract review that existed for years. And then over the years, we kept embedding new controls on top of one or the another. So we started from A to B, but then we had like A1, A2, A3 processes that got added. And then you go from A to Z, and then you come to B, and then you come to D. So over time, I think it just translated in duplication of the work, both for the finance team and the business team, frustration among the business users because sometimes they feel that, you guys are just not happy with whatever we give you, and multiple dependencies on back and forth. So one of the transformational initiative that we did was, how do we really kind of look for a single source of truth from a data perspective? How do we really tie back to the information coming from the upstream system and let the downstreams consume, and avoid as much possible as back and forth dependency and human intervention? So yes, it is critical. Today, what I believe doesn't exist is a clear strategy. I think that's one of the stuff where the prioritization and the strategy is not always aligned. And the lack of that just becomes, it kind of creates its own disruptions because you end up operating in silos, and sometimes it's the same information which is being used, but two outcomes being presented to the same leadership team. And then, it also questions the authenticity of what you have presented, right? So that's definitely there. Other thing I believe is the skill gap, because today, as we wish to kind of adapt to change, we just don't have probably the talent to kind of do that. We do not really have clarity of, expectations between our IT organizations and the business organizations. And sometimes that understanding and skill gap also translates to, a lack of proper outcome. But hoping that, I think that's I'm seeing that becoming one of the key drivers where a lot of the large organizations have started to realize that, I think, as long as they really want to succeed long term, they have to invest strategically in terms of creating a data lake or a data repository that is central to everybody, and eventually, I think, becomes, more powerful tool to deliver rather than trying to. And I think sometimes it's also insecurity because people also think that they want to get ahead of the other team or the other partner, and the lack of partnership also, I think, gets into that. You kind of create that silos.
If I can just ask, just on.
Yeah.
So, to a budding manufacturing company who's not used to having data in a structured manner, okay, and you've always dealt with data, and then, so what would be your 2-3 principles that we have to, or 2-3 ideas that we have to have for us to get to having a data lake like what you said?
I think again, strategy will be my first thing to do. I think, as you're saying that you're growing at a rapid pace, while your teams will not really grow at that same pace. I wouldn't say we had a similar challenge. I think IT sector had reached its maturity at some point, and growth wasn't really as fast across the industry. But clients were being very conservative in terms of how do they spend. So there was a very, very visible shift from getting into long-term, large value contracts to short-term spends. For us, that resulted in a huge volume of transactions, right? So one of the things that I think you have to consider is, what's your strategy? Like, have a forward looking view, more from a long-term, short-term perspective, and just list down what are all the key things that probably are required across different functions and start collating a central place where everybody has access to the data. I think that could be having something where multiple stakeholders can really kind of look into something, and having access is something key to your processes where, I would say people can take any benefit from.
Yeah, I think just to add to what she's also saying, right? I think the one thing that I think you need to, as the CFO, also start orienting everyone, right? I mean, you can never really control what your revenue growth is going to be because the domestic market has these capex cycles that you go through, right? So, but what you can control is how do you control market share? So that was a very clearly defined term. Then second was EBITDA percentage. And then the third one was working capital. I think these were the three big matrices that the CEO was goaled on, and that percolated down across all business heads as well as everyone in the organization. A big chunk of their variable pay was predicated upon hitting these numbers, right? And this was a data that was published every quarter, so people know, okay, am I going to make my variable pay or not, right? So I think to that extent, I think finance organizations, I think once you decide what are the big goals, right? I think there should be a lot of transparency that you build around, how do you publish this information? And that is what having a solid data platform or a data foundation will help you do, that there is one data that everyone, I mean, of course, from an access standpoint, you may need to, because you're a listed organization, you may not be able to disclose a lot of price sensitive information, which is not yet out in the market. But therefore, are we tracking to plan? Are we not tracking to plan? I think you need to enable people. So to her point, I think you need to see what is your strategy, right? Do you want to enable the business heads, right, with information around pricing, information about marketing spends that they want to make? What is every decision that they take, what is going to be the impact on the bottom line of the company, which is what your end goal is going to be. I think you need to define these things, and then based on that, say, okay, is this investment going to deliver the ROI that I need?
And sometimes you may have to trade off between the investment you make there versus the payout you make, because it's more in terms of the long-term vision of the organizational goals. So that might be one of the decisions you may have to drive.
So I think one of the interesting facets that Tejal, you brought about, and Rajan was kind of acknowledging to them, I'm guessing he's also gone through that, is when it's obvious that data is an asset for all of us, right?
Yeah.
But there looks like there are challenges that each of us face which are unique and nuanced. It could be a human challenge, skill challenge, functional org-related challenge.
Security
HR looking at
stuff, security becomes
privacy,
a big
guardrails,
privacy.
right?
Data security is a big factor in today's digital world, right? Like that's.
So then I'll lay that as a question to the group then, right? What would be the top two hurdles or bottlenecks to achieving this kind of a, an infrastructure or having a kind of a data layer that serves a lot of stakeholders? What would be your top two hurdles that you've kind of dealt with? Not necessarily from I guess you're an early adopter in some sense and having a single source of truth, but you still be very adjacent to customer conversations, knowing what customers' journeys are going through, each of them having their own data maturity. So what do you see as the top two hurdles in being able to deliver this as an infrastructure to the stakeholders and business? If you were to kind of take a slightly more, broader view rather than just from your Latent's perspective, right?
I think Tejal spoke about the fact that, a lot of people, I mean, data is an asset, right? And I think, so the biggest hurdle I would say is one, the fact that we have to move from the mindset of where information asymmetry was considered like an edge that you had, right? To how do you make that democratized in some sense, that this is for the welfare of the entire organization. I mean, if all of us have access to real-time information, we can make higher quality decisions, right, as well as more real-time decisions that will actually aid the organization. I think that mindset change is probably the biggest hurdle. I think we're all, at the end of the day, humans. We all also finance professionals traditionally. It's a knowledge-based sort of skill set, right? At the end of the day, we're not doing hard labor over here. So anything that's around information or skills or experience that you've gathered over a period of time, you want to be productive about it. But how do you democratize it? I think that's the biggest hurdle that I can think of. The second one, of course, is for me today, being the CFO again, how much to do it, right? I mean, because you don't want, all information to be available to everyone within the organization, right? And therefore the right level of access to the right people. I think that's the one thing that you need to crack. You have to constantly monitor who has access to how much level of information. So even though we have this PRM, we're very, very clear that, like, for instance, an account manager will have access only for his account, the account that he manages, right? He should not have, even for the business unit that he rolls up under, for instance. The business unit should have access to their information as opposed to the org-wide information, right? Now, of course, people are always wanting to know what is happening in other sort of entities. Hey, by the way, you're allowing that person to price more aggressively, but then you're sort of holding me back to a higher level of margin that you want me to. And so how do you the push and pull that you have to manage? I think those are the big hurdles that I can think of.
Understood. Okay. And so, Suresh, from your perspective, I know you already kind of gave some insights in terms of the challenges that, especially in your rapidly scaling business per se. Is it more transaction-related data that's a challenge for you, given that the number of vendors that you're dealing with, the number of fragmented parts and components that go into every product that goes to a customer, just the sheer scale and volume of dealing with so many stakeholders? Is that itself a challenge for you to capture data efficiently at the source to begin with? Is that probably more the biggest challenge for you per se at this juncture, or do you see something else?
I wouldn't say that's the biggest challenge. There are three bigger challenges. Okay, one, like what both of them said earlier, it is centralizing the data and then making the people not feel insecure about it or not feeling territorial about it, and then having access to data. That is definitely a challenge. The second I would say is, see, for us, data is not just about the past. It's about what we are going to do the next 1 month, 2 month, 3 months. Okay, so there's so much amount of planning that needs to do, because you need to have, let's say there are 1,000 parts that needs to come. If 990 comes and 10 doesn't come, you can't do the planning. If something happens, something will come in ship, something will come in air. So what is coming in which way? So how do you do the future planning?
Predictive analytics.
So excuse the word on predictive and analytics, but then just stay with the forecast data. As simple as that itself, capturing the data itself is becoming a challenge. It is lying in every individual's laptop. So and then every individual's laptop, what is the past, what is the future, both of it coming together in a centralized fashion and then being available and accessible. So that is the challenge. The second thing I would say is, at least from my limited perspective, the ERP what we are using today, okay, we have to change our processes, or we have to do something outside the ERP, so that the ERP is only so much, right? It is fixated in a certain way. Yes. Okay, and when it is fixated in a particular spot in a particular way, and then you can't spend so much. Rather, you would have another tool itself rather than spending on changing the ERP itself. Okay, so when that is there, I think that is a bigger hurdle, I would say. Okay, what is the input that gets into the ERP, and from the ERP what comes as an output? It is not in a fashion that is usable for me. Okay, when it is not in a fashion that is usable, or when it is not allowing me to just feed in the data the way how I have it at my first point, and then that ERP becomes a challenge. Then either you modify that, or you have something on top of it, on side of it, so that it can coexist.
So is that something which I wanted to ask also, given that he's picked up that ERP question, and this is from your experience as well. ERP 10 years back was like one of the most overarching project that any team takes through, right? And it was sold to all of us saying it is going to be unifying, it's going to bring processes together, etc., etc. In hindsight, was it an oversell given the state that it is right now? Because just to give you a context, ERPs are now being said it's a state of record. Yep. It's only going to have records. It's nothing more than that. I mean, the word ERP itself means business processes, enterprise risk, enterprise grade processes, etc. I think all that's gone out of the window. They're just saying ERP is a state of record, right? So was it an oversell 10 years back that we were all an ERP project?
You say that it has worked for us so far, right? We are dependent on it. So I wouldn't say an oversell. That was probably the need at that point of time. And as things evolve, we need to see what next, right? So I think that's the mindset shift is the key, and adapting to change is something that we just see is a struggle at some point in time. So change is the only constant, is what I think we have lived over the last several years. And I would say that just to kind of add on to his point as well, right? One is the mindset, and the other thing is an alignment, right? Like sometimes the messaging coming from the top also helps in terms of who are the data owners versus who will have the access, and then the right level of access, right? So I think, to me, when I go back to the challenges, that's the key thing. And going back to the systems, I think at this moment there are new solutions available, but it also depends on the size of the organization, how fast and easily you can switch to different models. Like for a company of a small size organization, it might be an easy shift from one ERP solution to a cloud-based platform or something like that. But large organizations where, over the years, you've really kind of not just used those systems as is, you would have also built in a lot of customizations. You would have really created your own specific requirements, right? So it just becomes a challenge. Even if you believe that it's outdated to some extent, it just poses a challenge to shift, because nothing can really replace. It's not a lift and shift anymore, right? You will have to really carefully think. If you take that decision, it will really require huge investments. Second, a fallback plan, right? Like, what if this doesn't work? Do you have a rollback plan? Like, you can't really stop your operations, you can't stop your reporting, you can't stop your day-to-day transactions. So that has been a challenge again for us as well. Like, do we think that ERP which we use is outdated? Sometimes the answer is yes, because the way the business models are evolving, we hear from a business team that your systems do not give us a solution that we're looking for, and this is not the best practice anymore. But are we ready to switch? I think it's a big strategic decision and an investment which the organization has, and it's going to be a multi-year project, right? You have to kind of also see, do you break this into phases?
Understood.
And then gradually shift versus go a big bang. And sometimes you can even make a choice with respect to that.
You got it.
So yeah,
So
that will be.
you have anything to say on the?
No, so I think ERP for sure. I mean, to your point, you spoke about it as a system of record, right? Obviously, when we talk to end clients, and I'll give you an end client perspective, and I'll give you a company perspective as well. The end clients, of course, I mean, they have a very clear segregation of what are my systems of record keeping and what are my decision making systems, right? So decision making systems for a lot of organizations, unfortunately, like he said, either sit adjacent or on top of it could be a dashboard, it could be a predictive model that actually helps them sort of make decisions, right, in terms of what inputs flow from the ERP into the decision making system itself. So for clearly a lot of organizations are not using, or at least our end clients are not using the ERP that they've invested in as the system of decision making, and they're actually building a lot of things on top of it, right? But in terms of, I think, who drives the ERP implementation? I think that, I mean, if it was a very finance driven initiative, that it ends up being a system of record, okay? And that's the unfortunate sort of reality for a lot of Indian corporates, where it's a finance driven initiative.
Yeah, true.
It's not a CEO initiative, right? If it becomes a CEO initiative and that's the way we sort of implement the ERP, I think
the design itself may be different.
Exactly. So I think that again, from how you approach it is where lies the true efficacy of the system itself. So that's what I think there is. Of course, I mean, if you implement it well, I've seen organizations where, to your point, the level of customization, the level of the enterprise context that has been built into the ERP makes it irreplaceable. I mean, you cannot sort of
very challenging.
yeah. So I mean, so many critical sort of processes run on the ERP, right? And therefore, it's the cost of moving out is very high.
And it also creates IT dependencies, and sometimes when the versions of the platform that you're using just are not supportable anymore, that becomes even more challenging, because you are now in like a loop where you have to kind of rely on your internal teams to kind of fix things.
But I've also seen on the other end an organization implement SAP just like a version of Tally, right? So they actually moved from Tally to a more costly version of Tally, right? So I've seen both ends of the spectrum. It depends on how, like, again, because this was a finance driven initiative, so they were comfortable with Tally. They wanted a version of Tally that they were sort of okay with.
So essentially, then I can draw a crux saying the potential of an ERP continues to be pervasive and very impactful, but it's probably the approach towards
Absolutely.
adopting it again makes the difference in whether it's actually going to give that tangible benefit or whether we are breaking somewhere on the way in terms of what we intended and what we ended up doing per se.
Yeah.
So, slightly kind of shift the flavor more to a people's kind of a discussion. And one of the good things that happened organically in this conversation is a lot of you spoke about business. And many question that I asked from a finance perspective, the first perspective that I get from each of you is, what is business perspective? What is finance perspective, right? Yeah. And I think that's a very great start in the way I want to look at it for young aspiring, professionals, not necessarily accountants or chartered accountants, etc. For young aspiring finance professionals or professionals who are looking at this space per se in itself, what is it that you want to pass on as an insight or as an approach or a mindset that you need to look at, compared to what it was probably when we started off? It's probably saying, hey, audits or compliance with accounting standard. We used to keep roaming around with income tax ready reckoners and acts and statutes. I think those are gone out of the window. We don't, bookshelves are probably still props. We don't really need them at this juncture, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, what is that underlying mindset that you'd like, young professionals to look at per se in today's day and age from a approach standpoint? How should they, if somebody's a 20-year-old and they're going to pass out of college, right? What should they be looking at? How should they be looking at it from their own career as a finance career? What should they be looking at it per se, right? Because each of you are talking business. So I think that from your perspective, you already made the shift. You're not talking accounting standards or compliance or etc. etc. So
I think in every single interview what I have taken the last 1 year, okay, every single team member who's coming and joining, the first thing I ask is the role is to create and add value, genuinely. Okay, that has to be the mindset, that has to be the approach. Okay, we can take multiple decisions, whether it is a yes or no. As long as it adds value, take the decision and work on that. So adding value, okay, that has to be the first goal. The second thing I would say is openness. I learned it very late in my life, where being open and being open to be challenged, being open to change, I think that has helped a lot. Being open to be proven wrong, being open to be challenged, that mindset, that an approach without feeling insecure, being confident about it, that is an important aspect. So I think these two are the major ones. Of course, accounting standards, tax laws, like what you say, we will the technical aspect, the technical skill, we will need that. But then these two will help amplify it multiple times.
Got it. Tejal, you have.
I definitely see a shift. I think it's no more a one-way street where they are looking for a job and then they are like trying to get something. Today I see young professionals being a lot more confident. I think they are also interested in terms of what the organizations can offer them, right? Like, how do we make sure that as they start their professional journeys, what do we have to offer them, and what's the win-win for both of us, right? So the challenge is, how do you really attract? That's one thing, but the bigger challenge I think I see is, how do you really develop and retain them as our asset in a long-term basis? Because the mindset is that they really want quick exposures. They really want to go up in the ladder. I think as we talk about transformation as rapidly changing, it's just the mindset changing in the Gen Zs or the Gen Alpha, whatever we call it. I think they also are really looking at faster growth for their own self, right? So if you just have them sit and do very traditional, repetitive job, you're just not going to stay for long. So what I see a challenge and probably even an opportunity for us is, right, how do we really create this hybrid environment for these associates where you are able to kind of give roles which are probably human centric and has human in the loop, but at the same time you have also embraced these technologies, so they are not really sitting and spending time on repetitive activities, right? So giving qualitative job and setting the right expectation in terms of what's expected of them, and also giving more broader visibility of how this will open up a bundle of opportunities for them. I think setting that expectation is very critical as we kind of try to really build the teams at lower level, because sometimes there's also this anxiety to learn and sometimes there's an anxiety of insecurity because they just don't know at what point of time their job is going to get replaced with a technology or a digital labor, right? So, so the right mix or a blend of the talent and the technology is going to be critical in the coming years, is how I feel.
Got it. And before you pick that up, and I wanted to add one more complexity in that sense, right? Like she beautifully brought out. I guess one of the things that I keep telling my team members is that anybody is working with me so far is you need to understand technology as a layer, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we are not divorced from technology as consumers, whether it's ordering on Swiggy or as professionals, whether it's researching or for travel. I think without Google Maps, we would be non-existential in terms of travel. So I think we have to be aware how technology works, generally speaking, in today's context, and how they work is probably more important rather than just using the application and then consuming the outcome out of it. Trying to just go one step further and have that inquisitiveness to figure out how that works and what do they make it to make how do they make it work for us to make our life easier. Having that sense of inquisitiveness is probably an important facet to any job that anybody wants to look at, and I think it's become a very important subject to be thought about or taught itself. And academically also, I feel it's one of the aspects that need to be ingrained in today's day and age with multiple schools and syllabuses in terms of how technologies generally work. And because sometimes I see my son still doing HTML coding, right? I mean, it was a subject when we were studying in school. You can't expect children of today to even know the syntax of how HTML works per se, for that matter, right? So if from a finance professional perspective, if I were to kind of look at that as well and say, given your, you've been very close with technology driven solutioning per se, how does it that you think that finance professionals should look at it today with adding the technology as a layer and also saying what should they be looking forward to from building their career aspirationally perspective?
Yeah. So just to sort of sort of combine everything that Suresh spoke about and then what she also said, right? I mean, I think the one aspect that I would look out for, when I'm hiring someone would be typically curiosity, right? I think that's the one thing that I would really, how curious is this person and their willingness to sort of, he spoke about being open, right? Openness to sort of adapt and change. I think those would be softer aspects that I would absolutely look for, and I would probably do a sort of further test on or maybe stress test on how the person responds, right? Because I think those are absolutely critical. I think today, to your point, the fact that people don't need to know coding anymore, right? I mean, you just need to ask. I think the ability to ask the right questions is what will sort of differentiate the quality of professionals today. If you're able to ask the right questions, there are enough tools and technology to give you the right answers, right? I think as data foundations get better and better, data gets democratized, right? It's more about asking the right questions as opposed to sort of knowing how to get the right answer, right? I think that skill set, I mean, and in the past, you would say, hey, bring that person, he only knows how to run this report, right? And therefore, there was the people dependency on that aspect, right? I think that has gone away completely because you can just prompt and ask the right questions and you'll, as long as the data quality is there, right? So I think curiosity, openness, and willingness to sort of adapt to and embrace technology is one big thing. I think the other thing that we absolutely need to do is use technology to remove most of the grunt work, right? I think there is no pride in sort of spending hours and hours doing a lot of grunt work, right? And I think that completely, that mindset has to sort of shift, right? So to your point on book close and the fact that which 10th or the 15th, we should look at a day one or day two book close, right?
Or concurrent book close,
absolutely, yeah.
Daily book close.
In fact, I there's this quote that I remember from this was the founder of a company that I used to work with, and of course he had his the second generation sort of coming into the business, right? And he came from his father was the one who built the business, and the son came from a very different mindset, right? Of course, he's there's generational wealth and all of that, but then very different ways of working. And one of the things that he would tell me is, if you want something to be done in the quickest manner, give it to the most laziest person, right? Because he will find the shortest way to get the work done, right? So, and he would say that his son is exactly like that. So because he's super lazy, but he'll find the smartest and the most quickest way to get things done. I'm not saying that you should take shortcuts, but that's the reality of Gen Z now. They will not want to do a lot of grunt work. They will want to find the quickest and the shortest way to get things done. So you have to ensure that you're finding the right people with that openness and willingness to work with technology. I think that's the key.
Yeah, and interesting aspect that I'm also finding recently is the 23 to 28-year-old or 30 or 20 or 29-year-olds who are in the market right now. You're seeing a diverse kind of a skill set that's coming through. Like in our organization, we've had a couple of people, like typically audit, right? You take challans and you test it and you print information, you put it in its place and then you analyze it, etc. And there was this one young boy who came in and he's like, what are we wasting our time on? And he spends, without telling his manager on the job, he goes off the grid, spends a day or so, comes up suddenly next day and says, I've done it, I finished it. Like what? It's all tool. There's all a tool. You just put in the document there, everything automatically comes out, right? So I think that ability for them to think in a very different way, lateral thinking or out of the box thinking is probably a facet. In fact, even our own tech team, we have 3 accountants who are coders, right? So proper coders, right? And it was quite surprising, right? They've reskilled themselves unacademically, right? Not through certifications. On the go, real time, they've reskilled themselves in the last 3 to 4 years, right? And they're competing with engineers who come from, say, Freshworks or TCS saying, no, this approach doesn't work. That approach works. This approach doesn't work.
Questioning the why part
Exactly.
of it is very important, because I think, to his point, it shows the curiosity and finding a solution without kind of, again, we being the gatekeepers as finance professionals. How do you get there? I've seen some young people who like every day morning show up and like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Like, what if this is stopped? I'm like, okay, you give me a solution. Every single day, like I had a team member who like every single day would show up to my desk and he's like, why are we doing this? And I'm like, okay, you're just 6 months into my team. Give me a better solution, right? So yeah, I think the thought process is different.
They are so much more engaged, engrossed, and then they're finding shorter ways, like you said, smarter people, shorter ways, but better quality, and then
I think they know how to stay relevant also.
Oh, yeah.
I think in the current era, I think being relevant is very important. So
So I'll ask the dark underbelly side of question as well, the inverse, the flip of it, right? With AI specifically, in the context of AI, I recently in the last 3-4 weeks, I've been getting reactions. We are trying to move into an AI first mindset across our solutioning, not just for product, whether it's internal audits, whether it's advisory, whether it's implementation of control framework. We are trying to tell we are AI first. We use AI in whichever possible ways that we can and deliver it efficiently to the customer. In fact, you're telling the customer also we have a cost advantage because you're using AI. We'll pass it on to you if you allow us to use AI. Obviously, each of them have perspectives allowing AI usage, etc. So we give that luxury to the customer to choose pricing also with AI, without AI per se, right? So when we are going through this journey, we've got a lot of pushback. In fact, one recent conversation I remember when I told the person, hey, this is a great use case you can use in Claude, you can get it done through Claude. She was like, Kaushik, if everything AI does, then what is my relevance anymore? Right? Because the capability of AI is becoming better and better and better. So the question that I'm presenting here in that context is it overhyped in terms of where it could possibly be 2 years from now? I think all of us agree today it's nowhere close to being overhyped. It's still productivity related applications are a lot in our day-to-day in our day-to-day jobs as well. But if you were to speculate and wear a forward thinker's hat, right, for 2 years from now, how do you think it's a very disruptive technology, especially in finance, because we are rule based, we are not very, subjective based or human opinion based. It's very transactional. So do you think it's going to start eating into people's skills or capabilities from a finance perspective? And I'll give you a bit of a context as a spinner or as something which is slightly, out there. So there's this company, new age ERP companies that are coming up in the US, especially in the last 2 years. They are claiming that you can have a 1-member finance team for $100 million company, right? And that their ERP is built in a way where it can consume data through OCR. You scan transactions and entries are posted automatically. You scan invoices and it suggests entries based on your chart of account saying where should this go, which cost center should it go, and then user just confirms rather than passing entries. So these are the new age ERPs that are coming through. So I'm just throwing that as a context. So how relevant are finance professionals going to be 2 years later, 3 years later? And is that going to start eating up jobs per se? It's more like the con of an AI, maybe, if I may say so. Is that overhyped, or do you think there is some truth in it, or what is your sense? Where do we, each of us, see this evolving per se? And any of you can go, maybe.
I think human in the loop is not going anytime soon. there's always an element of judgment, your intuition, and probably, the experience. That to me is really fundamental to being core to human beings, and I do not see AI replacing that at any point of time. As I said, I think we just have to have a right blend of what humans can bring on to the table versus what the technology can bring, and really combine and take the advantage of the two rather than trying to think that AI is going to be disruptive. I think it could be a good enabler for really young professionals or even seasoned professions to really spend their time more on quality reviews rather than trying to sit and keep doing bookkeeping, repetitive tasks, consolidating data from one to A, or doing reconciliations and here and there. To me, I think we have to see this more as a tool that we can powerfully use, but end of the day, the decision making is still going to get controlled by humans. I do not see that replacing in near future. Maybe a decade down the line, it's a problem for another set of professionals, I would say.
Kicking the can down the
road.
Just to add to from where she left, okay. I think even today, I don't know, again, I have my own limitations on understanding what is AI, what is not AI. But let's say productivity, efficiency, automation, usage of all these tools is called as AI. Then from that perspective, I think even today, it's being fairly prevalent. Folks who don't use AI, okay, I think in some time, they may potentially become slightly irrelevant.
Got it.
Okay. People who are using, I think it's going to amplify whatever they're doing today. And like I said, if the objective is going to be adding value, being curious, being hungry, okay, if with all of that being there, the value addition from people who are using technology is going to be significantly higher. So just parallel drawing, then if someone is not so savvy with tech so far, okay, and if they continue to be
That
not tech savvy going forward also, then in 4 years, 5 years, or sometime soon, it will become, for example, in the case of our teams, okay, so whether it is the regular daily transaction, all the emails, the draft email reply to the customers or the vendors will be automated. The person will have to, like you rightly said, the person will have to focus on what is the decision that has to be communicated, okay, that cannot be automated ever.
Yeah.
Okay, so the decision, the human touch on the relationship that particular AR team has with the customer or the AP team has with the vendor, the treasury team has with the other internal teams, that can never be changed.
You got it.
But what usually would have taken them 10 minutes is now taking them 2 minutes, and that's how it has to be, where they focus on what decision
that's
am
a
I
way
taking.
to drive productivity,
Oh, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I think that's a classic way to really free up your brain to really invest time in more qualitative areas than mass.
Yeah, to his point, I think I don't think this is maybe the year or the next 2 years. I think we're in the decade of AI, right? I think it's probably, everything that we want to accomplish obviously will happen over a period of time. It's not going to happen overnight, right? But I think the fact that there is so much money that's going into this space, it's almost becoming too big to fail now, right? It's almost like if this fails, then there'll be like the GFC happened, right? It'll be something like that, right? So I don't think the world can afford something like that, right? So I think we all have to embrace it. We all have to be ready for it. I think to his point, people who don't embrace it will get weeded out, right? I think it'll be like a level playing field where everyone will have access to. So what you do with it is going to be the big differentiator for people. I think what the AI will not replace is, like, for instance, the four of us are conversing, right? And there is of course, if you were to put this in a video, for instance, right, and someone were to analyze the video, it will analyze the words and things like that. But the emotions, for instance, the way you're sort of playing the room and how do you sort of negotiate, negotiation skills, to his point, right, I think that's something that AI can never replace. That's something that will always be a human aspect, right? If I'm negotiating an M&A deal, an agent cannot come and do an M&A deal for me, right? So I would say for all finance professionals, you need to upskill yourselves. I think the softer aspects of what you do with the data and the technology, right? I think that is what will differentiate you and make you stand out.
This is one of the largest mutual funds in the country. Okay, so during the interaction with them, after the meeting was over, then they were asking, they do a lot of data analysis, data crunching at the top core level. Okay, while the data crunching happens at the deeper level, the decision is completely based on their feel for the management, their feel for
absolutely.
the business. Okay,
100%.
so how do you put a data score for a feel? Okay, so ultimately you need data, but then feel will always be over the data to make decisions within. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, it's just the human touch, right? Like, see, pre-COVID, all of us were used to being in office, meeting in person, and then there was like overnight shift to a virtual world. But as we go back into the office, there is the sense of satisfaction, there is the sense of personal connect, which I don't think it can be replaced by an agent, right? Like when you talk to an old friend, or when you really meeting somebody after a long time, I think it's just the way of how human beings operate, right? And I think it's going to take a long time for AI to get into that emotional aspects of replacing and making us as more of robots.
Yeah, and I think the larger philosophical question that I think everyone is grappling with is, if everything is done by AI, and therefore there are these 4 or 5 large corporations in the world that control everything, right? Who's going to buy cars? And I mean, everyone's going to be on a universal minimum wage, right? Who's going to buy Apple phones? And if everyone's going to be on a minimum wage sort of a thing, because skill sets are sort of now, I mean, at a certain level, and everything is all the decisions or the key decisions are being taken by AI. So I think it'll have larger economic sort of repercussions as well, I think, and that's where I think governments will intervene over time, right? And I think that's a larger philosophical debate about the impact of AI. But I think, to his point, I have seen, I mean, I think the real unlock, I mean, today a lot of people are, the way they're looking at AI is also, how can I eliminate the entry level work, right? I think for me, if an entry level person can actually work at a manager level or a partner level, right, in a consulting firm, right, with technology, that's the bigger unlock. I think everyone is approaching the problem in a different way, where they're saying, how can I eliminate the ground level work?
It's a lot of the preparation part of it, and shrinking the pyramid, right? Like basically today the pyramid exists at different layers. Probably the bottom layer is what we need to see, and how do you really help people from the bottom layer to move up in the pyramid?
Yeah.
And shrink your pyramid, right?
Absolutely.
Without
Then to both of you, okay, so then let's say, for example, in manufacturing company operators, so they still have to make it, okay, but then from you said we will have to help them go from the bottom layer to the next level, right?
upskilling, yeah.
Okay. So not so many people in the country, stepping outside Chennai, not so many people in the country have so many opportunities to upskill them. Okay, so then how are we helping them
This
to?
just goes as a responsibility on the management, right? I think identifying the right people who have that curiosity, the adaptiveness to change, and embracing change. I think it also, this is a way to really identify who are your key talent pool, who are going to be able to embrace to this change, adapt to this change. They will go up, right? Like, as if you just kind of draw lines or boundaries that you can't just operate outside of this, then you are going to stay behind in terms of, nobody's going to stop for you, right? Like, technology will
I think your question, though,
over.
in terms of, I think more like a distribution question, I guess, for you, in terms of how do we unlock opportunities for people who don't have access to opportunities. But there are companies who are already starting to do that. Zoho is a great example of a company not looking at metros as a strategy for talent.
Absolutely.
Right? From a talent perspective, right? Even manufacturing companies, the nature of job on the floor is still probably continues.
Yeah.
The issues there still continues from an industrial relations perspective, etc., etc. I think those issues are not changing anywhere in the near future the way we are seeing it. But at least we are seeing companies now looking at metros as a saturated place, both from an infra cost perspective, real estate perspective, cost of talent perspective. You're seeing all of that, being looked at as well for setting up a delivery center per se. And you're seeing companies, even GCCs, even MNC GCCs are now looking at tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 kind of cities from a distribution perspective. So is that what you're...
No, I think there's more to what she said. Let's say, for example, there are 2 GCCs here, okay, 2 or 3 GCCs, who in the last 6 months, 9 months in Chennai, okay, where at the bottom level, like you said, they're identifying the key people, okay. So the key is becoming a problem for the
Other people.
Other
Yeah.
people. So then, how are the other people being helped? To what extent? At least during my discussions, it was not fully.
But I think it's a bit of a two-way handshake, right? That if you are sitting at your level and having a 20-member team, and if there are two people who are constantly asking questions, I think human factor will send you to choose that person because that person is already wanting to stand out,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's a two-way handshake. Somebody is saying, hey, I'm there, I'm in the reckoning. And then you kind of get noticed and picked
Then
up
it
per
goes
se.
back again to being open.
Yes. And
Being
questioning.
open to upskill, being
Yeah.
open to
Upskill.
challenge, both of it.
Yeah. And expressing it, I guess, is probably the most important part. I think a lot of us, these in my earlier days, I used to have a lot of questions I used to keep in my mind because I had a doubt.
Yeah.
Should I even ask this question? Is it
Yeah.
appropriate for me to ask this
yeah.
question?
Yeah.
I think today's generation is not having that.
I was an introvert in my probably the first 10 years, I would really hesitate to speak in front of 10 people. Like, I would like, is it a silly question? Is it the right time to ask the
Yeah.
question? Or is it just the lack of understanding that I have? So I definitely had that, but it's just moving out of your comfort zone. I think sometimes just it takes that extra courage to make that, and it has to be a conscious shift. I think it's a self realization that if you don't do this, you probably going to just remain here and not move up. I think that has to be a conscious shift, and sometimes it's also by having those very open conversations and giving them a transparent feedback that, see, look, this is how things are changing, and if you really want to be in the race, you have to work on XYZ things, right?
Yeah.
So I think a proper feedback is something I would say is very critical, so that you've done your part as a manager to communicate that, and then the ball is in their court to act upon it.
Yeah. Just a point to what you said, and I think L&D is a big core function within all tech and tech-enabled organizations, right? I mean, in the manufacturing context, I'm not sure how much percentage of your overall spends do you actually allocate to learning and development, right? So I think as the CFO, I think, and that can be a big enabler for people down the at the bottom of the pyramid, right? How are you sort of reskilling them, upskilling them? How are you investing in them for them to step up? I think that from a manufacturing context, it's something that you could probably revisit and see what is the best in class, right? So that is one thing. I think the flip to all of this that I think is, with AI, all of us also feel in some sense very empowered, right? Because even on subjects that you actually, to your point that, is it a silly question, right? I think it also, for me, the biggest concern is 5 years from now, the amount of information that people have access to, they may even go and want to talk about topics that they have never had any sort of
handling,
real hands-on experience of, and then they would want to talk at an expert level just because they have the information to do so. I think that's where things will start sort of getting a little murky, right? Because if those are the people who are taking decisions, but they've never had hands-on experience of handling that situation just based on information that comes from say an AI or a tool, right? And they're taking those decisions. How they play out is something that you'll have to be watchful about.
So you're basically worried about augmented intelligence could be hallucinative.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yes.
Okay. So now I'll close out with this part. It's a rapid fire part. So I'm going to put you guys in a spot, right? But you'll have only one sentence answers.
Okay.
For a change, we've been giving the narratives for long
Absolutely.
now, right? And I have a set of questions. So it depends on luck and I guess who's going to get what. But I'll randomly just go in a certain order. We can start off from this way. So Rajan, maybe I'll start with you. What's the most overused phrase in board meetings which you'd like not to hear anymore?
Can we, okay, here. We need some blue sky thinking over here, right? So it's a very overused term. Because if you present something very granular, they want something that's very, very high level. But then if you present something very high level, they want to get into the details, right? It's like a double-edged sword. So blue ocean thinking or blue sky thinking.
Okay, cool. So Suresh, to you, if you had to explain cash burn using a food analogy, what would it be?
Using a food analogy. You wait in the queue, buy the food, without eating it, just directly put it in the dustbin.
That's a good one, actually. So, Tejal, to you, if your team had a mascot, what would it be?
I would say an owl.
Okay.
Because I think we have that sharp insights and an analytical prowess to looking at numbers, and when we are looking at large data, we can still really pinpoint what in that large Excel spreadsheet looks wrong.
Okay.
Do you know that, just funnily, I'll just add to this. Owl in different cultures means different things. Like in southern part of India, it actually means bad luck. So if you have an owl in the house, it's actually bad luck.
Yeah. There are people.
We don't need bad luck, but
Apparently,
seriously.
but it's an interesting one actually. So Rajan, this to you, and I think it's very relevant. What's your guilty pleasure or dopamine hit during quarter end crunches? Is it chocolate, doom scrolling, spreadsheets, or anything else?
Actually, the one dopamine hit that I religiously do, okay, this is something that I've always done. The day of the board meeting, and our board meetings start very early on because we have board members from the US who dial in. So most of our board meetings start at 7:30, right? Irrespective of the time, I go out for a run in the morning, right? I get up early. So if it's at 7:30, I'll probably get up at 4, head out for a run. Be a shorter run than my usual run, but then it just helps me clear out my head.
Rajan, there's not a guilty. It's making us feel guilty.
Everything. That's really making me feel good.
But good,
Yeah.
nice one actually. Tejal, to you this one. If Excel disappeared tomorrow, what's your plan B?
Oh my goodness.
Quite a few questions are AI inspired, by the way.
I would definitely consider changing my profession.
Okay, Rajan, one more last round. So if your P&L had a personality, would it be optimistic, pessimistic, or sarcastic?
100% sarcastic. I think I love sarcasm, and I try to build sarcasm into everything that I mean, not in a bad demeaning way, but then it's a big part of my personality. So I'm guessing the P&L would also have the same character.
Suresh, to you, in your finance team meetings, what's the one term that you'd like to ban your team even using in your internal finance team meetings?
Other team is not supporting me. that is a phrase I would like to, yeah.
Okay, I'll probably then end with Tejal with this one. What's the most overused buzzword in finance transformation today? Probably an easy one, Ellen.
I think we talk about the touchless end-to-end process transformation. I think that the touchless word has been the buzzword, I would say.
Great. So that ends with my inventory of questions. A lot of it just came from AI, by the way.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
Understood.
So thanks a lot for that. But if you were to kind of sign off on this, discussion that we've had with, thoughts that you'd want to leave on the table and go, what would be? Each of you can.
I would just say thank you so much, Kaushik and Gautam, for this opportunity. This is one of the first of the ways I have been talking as a podcast member, but it was really fun interacting, hearing different perspectives. So thanks for having, and I was definitely nervous at the beginning of the session, but you really made it very easy and seamless. So it was a wonderful experience.
Thank you, Rachel.
So thanks again, Kaushik. And when Gautam actually approached me for this, the first thought that came to my mind was, I've been wanting to, by the way, do a podcast where I run a podcast. So I'm guessing this experience will actually help me, sort of eventually get to it, right? It's one of the many to-do things that I have in my list. But then this is something that I thoroughly enjoyed. So thanks for this experience. I think the topic is very, very relevant and contextual. I think we're living in an age and time where there's so much happening, right? I think we all need to embrace the change. It is scary. It is going to shake the very core of what we were used to doing, right? But I think great things will come out of it. I think and with that positive sort of outlook, if we embrace it, I think we're all in a good place.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having. I thoroughly enjoyed interacting with all of you here. Okay. One thing what I have as a takeaway is on the aspects what both of you mentioned. I'm going to take that as a takeaway for try and see how I can implement. As a takeaway, another side is being open to upskilling is something that came out very, very important relevant from what all of us I think discussed.
Great. Thank you. Thanks a lot.